Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. Happy Wednesday! Yes, got my coffee. I'm on cup number 2 because I've been listening to the closing arguments in the Rentala case. So today I'm going to talk to you about 3 different trials. I know it's a lot, but I will also have them time-stamped. If you want to skip to the one you're more interested in, you can do that. We'll start off with the Rentala case. Then we're going to talk about what occurred on day 1 in the Maya Kowalski case versus Children's Hospital, and then the sentencing in Taylor Business's case. Yeah, all of it. So interesting. Get your craft out, the one you're working on, crochet, watercolor painting, diamond painting, whatever it is you're working on, get it out so you have something to do while you're listening, right? My hands have always got to be doing something, crocheting or I I had to yesterday no show because I had to go to the doctor. First time taking a lift, which was interesting. Um and very expensive. Yeah, I'm starting to show my age. That's expensive. It is. Oh my goodness. Okay. So first, we're going to talk about Rentala case because as we speak, the judge is giving the jury instructions on the law, and then he's going to send them off to deliberate. Now, how quickly they come back, I don't know. I don't know because there's a lot to talk about and digest in this case, and some theories that were offered by the prosecution and the defense that I hadn't really thought of. Some things I hadn't really thought of, but we'll consider them today. So let me find my notes on the Rentala case. Got notes everywhere. Okay, so funny story. I go to listen to the DNA. Yesterday, not yes, well, yesterday, day before yesterday, Monday, they had the DNA analyst on the stand, and I was very interested to hear what the DNA showed, and the trace evidence showed, all the results. We know it has all been collected. We've been hearing about that for a week. But what does it show? I go to listen to it was day 8. I go to listen to day 8's testimony, and Law and Crime has accidentally deleted the entire day. You looked at the video, it said day 8, and you go to watch it, and it's the last 30 minutes of day 8. And I'm like, where's the rest? So I'm like, I need to know these results. So I waited till after dinner last night and I checked again, and there it was. They had reposted it. They found some. Maybe they knocked on Court TV's door and said, "Hey, we're missing some footage." Anyway, it's back up, and I was able to listen to it and bring you the results. And no smoking gun, none whatsoever. Yeah. So they had collected a blood sample as you walk. Well, first of all, Karen Rentala is on trial for the 4th time for the alleged murder of her wife, Anne Marie Rentala. They've been married since 2007, and now it's 2010. They're not getting along. Lots of domestic violence going on between the two of them, and their 2.5-year-old adopted daughter, Brianna, is there for the whole thing. She gets to watch. Poor dear. Anyhow, I hope that child did not witness this murder. I hope maybe she was napping or, yeah. In any case, so now we're at the phase of the trial where we're going to hear the results of all this testing. So the stairwell that goes down to the basement, as you'll recall, the first responding officer testified that he and his superior found Karen Rentala in the basement with Anne Marie, who was deceased, and in her lap. So they get her out from under Anne Marie and they ask her to walk upstairs. So the sergeant goes first and they tell her, keep your hands in front of you, don't touch anything. So he goes first, then Kara, and then the responding officer. They all 3 go up and they sit around in the kitchen until everybody else gets there. So on your way up those stairs, there was like a bloody, like somebody had taken their hand and gone like this. And that was tested, came back to be Anne Marie's blood. Interesting, huh? So we know it wasn't Kara going up stairs that day because the officers had told her to put her hands in front of her. So was it Kara at an earlier time that had Anne Marie's blood on her and I don't know. The other thing that was pointed out is they had sprayed this chemical, and if it if the surface that they're spraying turns purple, that is presumptive positive for blood. So they tracked the everywhere that they sprayed, the concrete floor, the stairwell, and they followed the trail of this blood. And it was footprints and stuff. And it goes up the stairs and into the kitchen, and then it goes in the hallway and into the bathroom. Well, that just lines up with the evidence. We know that there were at least three people: Kara, the first responding officer, and the sergeant, who had these two guys had no idea what they were walking into. They had been told that this was a domestic violence. So they enter the house, they find this woman in the basement in the lap of her wife, and they have to assess whether there's anything that can be done to save her, and they quickly determine no, there's not. And once that was determined, they all left the basement, but they had paint and blood on their shoes. And Cara Rentella at this point, her shoes were off her feet, but her socks were soaked with blood and paint as she walks up those stairs. So that blood trail doesn't really tell us anything. All that blood was Anne Marie Rentella's blood from her blood force trauma to the head. But when did that happen? It could have been any time, because we know that at least that was probably that can be explained by the officers who were the first responders in Kara, you know, walking around in the paint, getting up and leaving and going into the kitchen. And after she gets in the kitchen, she asks one of the paramedics, I want to wash my face or my hands or something. And so he accompanies her to the bathroom. So that would explain why it's in the hall and in the bathroom. So it makes sense. It lines up with the evidence. Then they tested some hair that was in Anna Marie's hand at the autopsy, and they took it out of her hand and they tested that. They tested her fingernail clippings, and none of that came back with any DNA that was Cara Rentella's. The hair turned out to be Anne Marie's hair, although why you would pull your own hair, I don't know. Who knows? Then they found earrings at the scene. One of the earrings they found was kind of like behind Anne Marie's body, like just kind of sitting on her skin. And another one was found uh, at the front doorstep. Yeah. And they both neither of them had enough DNA sufficient that they could determine whose it was, that they could compare it with anybody, any known sample. So those earrings didn't really help out at all. Then they had the trace evidence person come on and talk about fingerprints. He talked about analyzing the paint chip or the paint that was on the front door. Remember, my opinion is that Kara got locked out. She took that shovel and she was trying to break into the front door, because you can see all those curvature marks that matched the shovel, and then there was a white substance on the shovel. So that white substance on the shovel matched the white paint that was chipped off on the door. So that was a match. So that shovel was used on that door. We do know that. But there was another theory that prosecution threw out during their closing arguments that I never even thought of, that Cara Rentella deliberately, after she murdered Anne Marie, wanted to make it look like a break-in. So she took that shovel to the front door, banged on the front door a few times, even with the front door open, because they showed some of that front door damage would have had to occurred with the front door open. Then she goes back and places it nice and neatly into the garage. Make it look like a break-in. I hadn't thought of that. I like my theory better. It's juicier. Yeah, she got locked out. She's trying to get back in. Yeah. I'm going to write the Netflix documentary on this one. So, but the paint on that shovel was from the door. We know that. One was from the other. But it did not match the ceiling paint that was down in the basement. Yeah. So, not the same paint. What else? I want to make sure I told you everything there. They tested so much stuff. Oh, here, this is really important. There were no fingerprints on the shovel. You're like, I just fingerprint the shovel. The handle's made of wood, and it's not a very porous surface. So it doesn't really hold fingerprints very well. So they could not find any fingerprints that were suitable for comparison on the handle of the shovel. But the paint bucket lid was tested in several different manners, because the first few ways they tried, nothing, they couldn't lift a print. So they finally tried this one last way, and there were some prints. And it matched the palm print of Cara Ritala. And which would make sense. If you're going to pull that plastic lid off, you're probably doing it kind of like this, you know. But so, palm print on the paint bucket lid. And that's about it. The nail clippings, those were all Anne-Marie Ritala's DNA. Nobody else's DNA. No unknown contributors. No, nothing that matched Cara Ritala. So, yeah, that was the evidence. So, the final witness was a medical examiner expert who came in to say that he estimated the time of death to be no later than 1 p.m. that day. Now, we know that after 12 something, we don't hear any more on Anne-Marie's phone except for a text message that she gets from Mark Olasak around just before 2 o'clock that she never reads. And this is a woman who, prior to that 12 o'clock hour, had made like 40 different text messages or phone calls constantly on this phone. But then after that 12 o'clock hour, nothing. Nothing. Yeah. Interesting. What else? Oh, so he based his opinion on uh, the first responders. He said they're trained paramedics. He says I was comfortable enough with their training that they would know what rigor mortis is, and but by what they were describing, the fact that she was moving her body as a whole, like, stiff, that's rigor mortis, and it happened before 1 p.m. And that testimony, you went back and forth with the cross-examined by the defense, and whatever. Defense is trying so hard to get the jury to focus on Mark Olasak. So then we have the closings that happened this morning, and the defense started. This was different. They're in Massachusetts. Usually the prosecution goes first, does their closing argument, then the defense, and then the prosecution has the last say. No, the defense went first, and then the prosecution. I was a little surprised. I guess some places they do it different. So she pretty much parroted what she had said during her opening statement, that this whole police investigation was botched. It was all based on a lie. They were dispatched out there to a domestic violence call. Well, that's not what they were responding to, but they did not know this. And so because of that information, they go gangbusters into the house when they hear somebody crying, which is Kara down in the basement. They go running down to the basement, contaminating the crime scene. Yeah, I mean, you heard how many people went in and out that side door before finally somebody said, stop coming in this door. We need to preserve the evidence here. There were so many fingerprints on that front door that, too many to compare. Yeah, because we know there 3 first responders went in and out that front door. We know the lieutenant went in and out that front door. We know the Kara Rentala went in, yeah. And once they have more than 5 contributors on a piece of evidence, they stop analyzing. They're like, too many, too many. Yeah. So that was the last witness. Prosecution rested, and we're doing closing arguments. I told you the defense was arguing, this is Mark Olasak. It's Mark Olasak. He deleted his text. He had sent a text to her around 1 something p.m., just before 2 p.m. And he deleted it. Why did he delete it? And at first he had told police, oh, I had gone to physical therapy that day, and then went home. Well, we know that that's not true. He'd gone to physical therapy, but he'd also gone to Home Depot, and he went to Walmart at 4:30 in the afternoon to buy a pair of $7.99 pants. But the police never go back and ask him, hey, you said you were just physical therapy and you went home. But we now know, since you gave us your bank statements voluntarily, that you were at all these other places. Yeah, yeah. They don't ask him. Copy. Okay. And the defense brings up the Carla Daniele again. She went for a run, like leaves around 3, from 3 to 7, she's on a run. I gotta tell you, if I ran from 3 to 7 o'clock, I'd be dead. If I had to run from 3 to 3:05, I'd be dead. But 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, she's out for a run. That would have been my argument. But where is she running for 4 hours? And who actually, did anybody get surveillance to show that she was actually running? Well, we know that the evidence shows that she had not seen Carla Donnelly since November of the previous year. She had not seen her for like 6 months. We also know, and the defense argued this on their closing, if Mark Olasak is texting, they're texting back and forth all day long. Lovey-dovey, I can't wait for my big kiss, and blah, blah, blah. And how do you go from that to murder? And nobody knew that, Mark knew that Kara was off that day and would probably be home. He said as much in his text. So why would he go over there? Nobody knew that Kara was going to get in her truck that day and take Brianna for this long drive where she's driving around for hours and hours, and nobody knows where the heck she went. We don't know if she says she last saw Anne at 3 o'clock. Okay, if that's when you say you last saw Anne, that's fine. So where were you between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock when you show up at the mall? For 2 hours. You're just driving around in the rain? And the defense says, oh, she had a 2.5-year-old. She's trying to get her to nap, and she probably fell asleep, and she was napping, and yeah, I don't know. And then all that texting that Kara's doing to Anne Marie. Now, she left the house. She says she left the house that day so Anne Marie could sleep because she knew she had to work again that night. Why would she be texting someone she had just left to go to sleep? I'm having dinner at Red Robin. Come meet me there. She's sleeping. She's got to go to work. You knew that. That's why you left. But now you're upset because she's not responding to your texts. So clearly that was all a ruse on Kara Rentala's part to cover up for the murder that she had allegedly committed. Anyway, so now it's in the jury's hands, and we will see what they think. Yeah. The judge has just finished instructing them, and, well, he's still instructing them. Still reading instructions. So they'll be going out to deliberate. I don't know if I'm going to cover that live because I have a live tonight scheduled at 7 p.m. Well, I'm going to schedule it for my Crop With Me Wednesday. If it comes in before that, I'll try to cover it live. We'll see. I'll set it up. But I have my nap. I'm old. I gotta get a nap. Yeah. Plus, I find that I'm not supposed to be talking about my injury, I have to rest. I can't sit here as long as I used to be able to sit here at the craft table. I have to lay down, put heat on my back, and just rest it. What I'm doing is elevating my feet at the table here, so my knees are bent and takes the pressure off my back. It's a little stool that Tia bought me years ago that I use down here. Anyway, let's talk about the Kowalski case. Maya Kowalski and her family, the Kowalskis, Jack Kowalski, her father, Kyle Kowalski, her brother. I just butchered that name. I apologize. The three of them are suing Children's Hospital, John Hopkins Children's Hospital, that was in St. Petersburg, Florida, for false imprisonment, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress. It's a civil case. So, a different standard, you know, they just have to prove by the greater weight of the evidence that these things happened. So, the first witness that they put on was Kyle Kowalski. And he only now is 15 years old. So, when all this stuff went down with his sister, he was like 9, 10, very, very young. And his answers to me seemed very, very well rehearsed. Like, almost, I've talked about kids before, they hear adults talking in front of them. And it sounded like he was sort of parroting what the adults had been saying, you know, very scripted responses. Um, and let me just talk about their attorney for a second. I think that he's like one of those figureheads. This is what I hated about practicing law in Florida. These good old boy law firms that have this figurehead at the top of the law firm. He started the firm, he hired everybody, everybody else does all the work, and then when it comes to the trial, they're like, polish me off, thaw me out, and put me in front of the jury because I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. Which is what I think happened here. Because this guy knows very little about his case, if you ask me. He stumbles, he mumbles, he fumbles, and then the young lawyers that are working next to him have to kind of rescue him, which is what I would be like. My boss would come in on his white horse and I'm the greatest, and I would have to say, you got that wrong. I remember one time stopping a deposition and taking my boss outside the deposition and saying, listen to me, you've got this all wrong. You're asking the wrong questions. I had to educate him. Frustrating. Anyway, that's what I think is going on here. So anyway, Kyle's response is very, very scripted. He did not get to go with them when they took uh, Maya, when Jack and Beata, her mother Beata, took Maya to Mexico for her ketamine coma care, so to speak. She went down to Mexico. They took her down to Mexico. They put her into a medically induced coma where she stayed for 6 days, and they gave her super, super high doses of ketamine. And it worked. She came back from Mexico. Kyle said it was like, a miracle. Uh, he said he could remember times when Maya would just be sitting in the window looking out at him playing, and he would wish that she would come out and play with him, and that they were uh, very, very close friends, but she couldn't play with him because she couldn't walk, and but he said after she got back from Mexico, she was very much improved. She could walk, or her feet weren't pointed out again, and with physical therapy, she was starting to walk. And then she got bad again. He said mom and dad were researching every night, trying to get Maya out of the hospital because uh, he was very much aware of what was going on with the hospital, that they were not allowed to see Maya. Now, he could go visit Maya, but it was for specific times and a specific amount of time that he could spend with Maya. He would go and they would play card games, and like they like to play Uno and things like that. He said that at night, they had rooms on one side of the house and the parents had a room on the other side of the house. He said they even had walkie-talkies that they could talk to their parents in their room. So he said Maya would keep him up at night, crying in pain. Um, yeah, very sad. Cute kid, really, really cute kid. He's very into fishing, and that's how he says he coped with all of this, with the death of his mother. Now, the day that his mom committed suicide, he and his father had gone to a birthday party. They came home from the birthday party. They didn't see Beata anywhere. They just, Maya was in the hospital uh, for over 2 months at this point. She'd been in this hospital. Beata was beside herself. She had not seen her daughter in 2 months and didn't have any prospects of seeing her in the future. So she committed suicide. So they don't find her when they get home. So they just sitting there watching TV. And then the next morning, Jack, the dad, goes into the garage and finds Maya there. So not Maya, I'm sorry. Jack goes into the garage and finds Beata there. So Jack quickly calls his brother, who is his brother took the stand next. His brother's name, I didn't catch his name. Nice guy. Anyway, Jack is older, the older brother. He's the younger brother, but very, very close. So he was living up in Chicago, the brother, and right sometime during all of this, he moves down to Florida because he and his wife he had gotten a job doing like airplane upholstery. That's his business. So he brought it to South Florida. He had a job down here to do, and once he had done the job, he decided to move down here. But he wanted to buy a house in Jack's neighborhood so they could be neighbors. They had a deal on a house that went through. By the time they got here, it was already sold, and so they bought a brand new house in the like one neighborhood over. So he was able to respond very quickly. He just walked out of his house and walked over to Jack's house. That's how close they were. So he goes over there and gets Kyle, and you can hear on the 911 tape that was played a couple of times for the jury that when Jack calls 911 to say that his wife has hung herself, and the 911 operator's like, "Are you sure she's dead?" He's like, "Ma'am, I was the chief." He was the chief of firefighting, chief firefighter. He said, "I'm a retired chief of firefighter. I know she's dead. I'm telling you." Because he said something about her arms were purple. And I don't know. But in the background, you can hear poor Kyle. He's crying and sobbing. So Jack's brother gets Kyle, takes him back to his house. He said they sat next to each other on the couch all day and just cried and held each other. Poor Kyle. He's just been through the ringer. Just been through the ringer. So Jack's brother, like I said, he was the next person on the stand. He used to be a police officer in that same county, Pinellas County. Then he went back to Chicago because he wanted to be near where because Jack and Beata met in Chicago, and that's where they were living. Then Jack and Beata moved down to Florida, and then after that, he and his wife moved down to Florida. His wife was also a nurse, so friends with Beata. Said they got along great with her. She was a wonderful person, you know. And he did comment that when Maya finally came home after the death of Beata, he said it was the worst she was in the worst condition he'd ever seen her. After spending 87 days in a hospital, she was in the worst condition he had ever seen her in. Yeah. So I still need to do yesterday's testimony, but that was Friday's testimony. Then Monday there was no court, so I need to let you know what yesterday's testimony was. I tuned into it, but they were arguing about evidence. they these lawyers, they want to spend the first 30 minutes to an hour every day arguing motions and evidence, and poor juries in the back waiting. The judge will give them a time to be there, and then they wait. This is all trials. It's weird. If you ever get jury duty, why you're sitting around, it's usually because there's a lawyer arguing about something with the judge. So then we got Taylor Schabusiness, the gift that keeps on giving. She was sentenced. Yesterday was her sentencing. Now, they did a pre-sentence investigation report. The defense actually paid for a private one, and it came back. And the recommendation of the defense, that report, was that she probably would be okay on parole eventually. So that's all they were arguing about. The judge has to sentence her to life in prison. She was found guilty of intentional first degree murder. So the sentence for that is life in prison. The only thing they're arguing about is he going to let her have parole someday in the future? Um, and in the end, he said no, no, no parole for you. But so we got to hear from Taylor Schabusiness's grandmother. Before I even get there, though, we're just going to talk about the elephant in the room on it. Look at this picture. Look at this picture. Oh my God. What is she wearing? What is it? It looks like a sack that goes over her nose and mouth. And then it has like a netting. And then the netting is bunched up here and tied. So she can't get out of it, obviously. And that's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, what is that? So, of course, I'm Googling it. And of course, there was thousands of other people wanting to know the same thing. It's called a spit hood, which tells me she was not being very cooperative with the corrections officers if they had to put one of those on her. Yeah. She's she's the whole time we were watching this trial and the hearings and things that led up to the trial, in my mind, the woman's nuts. She's nuts. But there was no psychologist or psychiatrist that was going to come in and say that, except for the one that the defense hired. All the rest of them are like, no, she's not nuts. She's just, it's an act. It's an act. So Taylor was found guilty, first degree intentional homicide for the murder of her best friend. They were doing methamphetamine. They were on like a 3-day bender, methamphetamine for 3 days in his basement of his mother's home. And she proceeds to kill him, behead him, and then chop up his body. Kind of gross. And then mom comes down later on and finds his head in a bucket. So the first witness that the defense put on was grandma. Then we learn, oh, she's had a hard life. Grandma lives in Texas. Grandma is taking care of Taylor Schabusiness's 2-year-old. She has a 2-year-old son, Mateo, that lives with grandma down in Texas. Grandma said they're in the process of adopting him. But even the judge remarked on the cycle that's going on in this family. Dad's in prison. Now mom's going to be in prison. What's going to become of this Mateo, who's living with grandma? So grandma says, she lost her mom when she was 12 years old. Dad, 1 year later, remarries, marries another woman that already has children, and then her and her brother, Taylor and her brother AJ, are given a Cinderella bedroom in the basement, for lack of a better story. And then her brother AJ dies in a car accident. So she's been through a lot. Then she gets pregnant, and the state takes her baby. That's how she lost her baby, because when she went in to have the baby, they drug tested her, and she came back positive. So the Department of Children and Families takes the child, puts it into foster care, and then later on gives the child to grandma to raise. So that's how Mateo ended up with grandma. And then after Taylor, who's living with her grandmother, at some point, and Mateo leaves and decides she's going to go back to Chicago. Now the father gets on the stand, and the father's talking about how the system has failed his daughter. And the judge remarked, What system is he referring to? The court system? What system? It's not the court system's job to parent a child. And I thought, yeah, you're right. It's not the government's job to parent a child. It's not DCF's job to parent a child. It's your job as a parent to parent your child. Yeah. So the judge said, oh, well, first the plaintiff, on the plaintiff's side, or the prosecution side, there was one person that wanted to speak on behalf of the victim, and he was a friend. And he just talked to Taylor. He said, listen, I was an alcoholic. I got help. I got clean. You should have done that too. And you didn't. Now you're in prison. There's going to be programs for you. Get in a program, get clean. Yeah. I thought that was, in other words, he'd kind of forgiven her because he himself was an addict. So the judge remarked, no one is responsible for where they come from, but they are responsible for the choices they make going forward. I agree. So he sentenced her life in prison without the possibility of parole for charge number 1. Charge number 2, mutilation of a corpse. He sentenced her to 7.5 years in prison, followed by 4.5 years of supervision. For the sexual assault on the corpse, he sentenced her to 3 years in prison, followed by 4 years of supervision. And then she had all kinds of revocation offenses where she's a prior offender, let's just put it that way, from drugs. So she violated her probation. So for all those probation, revocation violations and stuff, he sentenced her to another year. And she has to have a psychological evaluation, and she must follow through on all the recommendations of the psychologist and pay $1,614 to the court for costs associated with this trial. And that's it. Goodbye. See you later. She was escorted out of the courtroom. So that wraps Taylor's show business up. Because he said he felt that she was a danger to society. I agree. She can't control herself with the drugs. Even if she got clean, what's your guarantee that she's not going to go on one of these meth benders again? And she's not in her right mind when she goes on these meth benders and she commits murder. Okay, enough about all that. All right, guys, that's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and a small donation to support the channel. You can do that by following that thumbs up button all the way to the end. Just go swipe and you'll see super thanks. You can click that and make a one-time donation to the channel. Or you can just become a member of the channel. Yeah, that's always cool. Subscribe, it's free. Yeah. Have a great day, everybody. See you there. Bye. 7 o'clock. Yep. Craft with me Wednesday. Bye.